Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. What's up, guys? Welcome to Moonrunner City. I'm Chris. Today we're going to be looking at Enemy of the State. We're going to be doing a commentary companion to Enemy of the State, Will Smith, 1998, directed by Tony Scott, produced by the legendary Jerry Bruckheimer. Enemy of the State comes out, like I said, in 1998, late November of 1998, and releases with a $90 million budget and gets a domestic box office of $111 million, worldwide box office of $250 million. So not bad. And for Jerry Bruckheimer, this is his second movie of that year. That year, he also releases the smash Armageddon, which everybody knows of. And that year, Armageddon is the highest grossing movie released that year, but isn't the highest box office that year. So what ends up happening, let me explain. Titanic comes out December the year before, 1997, and that just stays in movie theaters forever and makes $488 million domestically. And so that takes the number one spot for 1998, and Armageddon comes in second with $198 million. And then all the way down at 17th place, you got Enemy of the State with, like I said, uh, $92 million. Oh, I'm sorry. So it was $92 million domestically, and then about 111 worldwide. So total, okay, was around 250. Those are the results I got. Like those can always vary. You got the DVD rental and sales. And so this movie makes a decent amount of money. And for Jerry Bruckheimer, he has a hell of a year. So we're going to get into it. We're going to press play. Let's watch it. I'm going to watch it. You guys want to watch it with me? Let's go ahead and press play now. Boom. We're off. Touchstone's pictures. Popping on. And now you get the Jerry Bruckheimer logo rolling through, which is, for me, back in the day, was like one of the coolest logos. Now you get a lot of like animated logos, but that was like one of the first that like really looked kind of real and edgy and really cool, the way like lightning strikes and hits that little tree. You just knew something good was coming. Jerry Bruckheimer is just a guy behind a lot, a lot of good movies back in the day, and in modern day. And back then, he's coming off just a string of just hits. So let's just get into Jerry Bruckheimer before we get into John Voight and his conversation with the senator here. So Jerry Bruckheimer, for Paramount Pictures, he's got Flashdance, American Gigolo with what's his name? Oh man, Richard Gere. So we got Flashdance, Beverly Hills Cop, Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop 2, and Days of Thunder. All for Paramount Pictures, all like in the early like 80s. And then after that in the 90s, right before this, we get like a crazy string of success. So in 1995, you have Crimson Tide, Dangerous Minds in 1995. 96, you get The Rock, right? 1997, you get Con Air. In 1998, you get Armageddon, and you get Enemy of the State. And then in 2000, he comes out with a three-piece with Coyote Ugly, Meh, Gone in 60 Seconds, which I did a commentary to. Go check it out. And then Remember the Titans, football, sports drama with Denzel Washington, and a bunch of other guys are in that. So let's get back into Enemy of the State here. That's Jerry Bruckheimer. That's the producer. Tony Scott's directing this. And we got John Voight here talking to the senator. Basically, John Voight is bad guy, goon working for the NSA, national security, kind of like a government, a secret government branch that deals with secret stuff. And so in the movie, John Voight wants to get a bill signed, and he needs the senator's help. The bill, which actually surprising, like ironically, later on down the road in real life, in our history, ends up becoming like what is known as like the Patriot Act. And so in the movie, John Voight wants to get this bill signed that enables him to kind of use the day's technology to kind of spy and look over U.S. citizens along with foreign people and targets. And so this is all very like scary. How and why are you able to access this kind of information that's private? And so the movie is basically just about these themes of private security and your privacy, and how now technology has gotten such a way where the government can record you and access you at any time. Who is watching you and what are they doing with that information, I think, is the big question of the film. And do they have the right to? Also, back then, they're still asking, does the government even have the right to kind of spy on its citizens? So this is all, like I said, this is all before uh, 9/11 happens, and then we end up getting the Patriot Act, which ends up kind of doing just that, kind of giving the government the accessibility to kind of access your personal privacy. And now today we're all kind of very, you know, accustomed and used to being watched from different cameras, like we're getting shown here in the title scene here, which is like composed of a bunch of different surveillance shots from either satellites or kind of security cameras. So in 1998, I mean, this is the days before like everybody has a cell phone. Um, People have cell phones actually, obviously back then, and there's computers and people have internet access. But it's not something that like everybody has, and not everybody has all these crazy devices um, that basically can like record you video, through video and audio. So it's a lot easier to kind of stay off the grid back in these days. And so a lot of people don't really know that the government and the just everybody is just being recorded in this way and just in this just scope. People. I don't think this is the first time your people were exposed in a big way. With a big Hollywood movie to this idea of your every step can be recorded somehow. Whether it's through surveillance camera or just being followed, it's all very, very easy. And so this kind of opens up the conversation of now it's all out there, who's able to access it and what they're able to do with it and how they're able to go about that. I think it's also um, a big question. If they have the right to spy on you, how are they allowed to go about doing that? What kind of warrant do they have to get to be able to spy on U.S. citizen? So this movie kind of opens up those questions and does it in a very like entertaining and cool way. Very flashy Will Smith movie. Will Smith. Let's talk about Will Smith for a little bit. He's about to pop up here. He's a labor lawyer in this film, and he's kind of representing a client who's dealing with the mob. And so he's dealing with like a lot of nefarious people that are doing things under the table, and a lot of like he's also in a world of secrecy and surveillance and people being blackmailed. So Will Smith coming off of Men in Black here, and this is his first dramatic turn. Will Smith is doing a dramatic kind of action movie here. Before this, he does Independence Day, Men in Black, and way before that, he does Bad Boys, the first Bad Boys with Martin Lawrence, and they're all kind of like comedic kind of turns for him. and he's not really just expanding his acting range in those movies. So this comes out, and this is like kind of like his way to like show that he's able to not just be like the funny guy or just always throw down, one liners. And he has the chance to. He absolutely has a chance to. He kind he has to. And this is his kind of shot into like being a big movie star, big action star. This is the days of the big brawly action stars are going away, and a new action star is kind of emerging around this time, and Will Smith is on the scene, and he kind of fills that spot. And I think he does it with this movie. And yeah, so he's able to show that he's able to be act and be vulnerable and intense and just tender, but also he there's times when he's like on edge and he's kind of a dick. He's not quite slapping people yet, but you know, he definitely abuses Gene Hackman a little bit. There's a little bit of elderly abuse going on, so we got to watch Mr. Will Smith a little bit. I like Will Smith. I think everybody likes Will Smith, and I think at this time everybody was like really on the Will Smith train. This is before a lot of things end up happening with Will Smith, and we'll just leave it at that. This is Miss Lisa Bonet of of the Cosby Show fame. Another like really good actor playing a little small role. She actually is playing um a decent sized role in this movie. And she actually hasn't doesn't do a lot of movies and film, especially big movies and film like this one. She's like I said, she's from the Bill Cosby Show. And then from there, we don't she doesn't really pop up a lot. And then so to see her in like this big budget film was kind of like, oh yeah, look at Lisa Bonet, which is the case for a lot of these people, like Tom Sizemore. So Tom Sizemore has got an uncredited role in this movie, and he's got a bunch of like lines in this movie. Pops up in the beginning and at the end, and he's got an uncredited like role. And a lot of these like Tony Scott just knows how to shoot mob guys at a table talking. This guy he can shoot anything. He can make anything look nice and cool and sexy and just awesome. But yeah, mob guys chatting around the table, smoking cigarettes, always in a Tony Scott movie. It looks awesome. So here we got Will Smith basically telling mob dude, Tom Sizemore's character, Pintero. He's telling Pintero, look, man, I got some dirt on you, right? Keeping with the themes of the movie of like personal, mm, your personal life getting recorded and used against you. And so Will Smith is the perpetrator in this instance, and kind of using this information and this recording against Mr. Pintero. So Mr. Pintero is not having it. He basically just takes the tape away from Will Smith, calls him a racial slur, tells him to get out, and Will Smith obliges. He tries to hold his own and tells Tom Sizemore, like, look, I got more recordings of that tape, so, you know, be cool. But he's still scared. He knows that, like, he shouldn't be in this room right now. He's messing with the wrong people. But he's trying to hold his own and just get out alive. And get out, his jacket's still on. Like I said, you got Tom Sizemore and a lot of other very like well known faces that you've probably seen before in other gangster movies. I know one of those guys pops is I forget his name, but he is in Analyze This and That. He's like Robert De Niro's side henchman. And he's always popping up and giving Billy Crystal a hard time. That guy, the guy in the center there, right in the middle with the brown jacket, standing up, black shirt, brown tie. So yeah, this is like this. You wouldn't consider this an action movie. This is more of like a political thriller, which is interesting because it has the pace and the feel and the gravitas of a big action movie, but there's not a lot of action set pieces. That being said, there's a lot of chasing. There's a lot of chasing. There's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of setups. Right? This movie looks like expensive, but still under $100 million. Not bad, Tony Scott. There's a lot going on here. You're in the hotel, and then you got to shoot these. You got these FBI agents that are modern. Watching the gangsters. Will Smith knows that there's FBI there, and so he's just glad that there's some sort of police watching because it would have been his ass. So John Voight murders dude in broad daylight, just like standing there with all his goons standing there and murders guy broad daylight in public. And lo and behold, it gets caught on camera. And so it gets caught on camera, and Jason Lee, another good actor, playing another bit part, small part. Not a bit part. It's definitely a vital role. So he comes along and he's got this camera in a box because I guess he watches geese with that camera, and the camera just so happens to capture everything in frame, clear as day, because it is in daylight, catches everybody, and yeah, ends up being kind of the focal point of the movie. This tape. It says park ranger sees it, and he's being paid off by somebody. So he calls them and tells them, "Hey, you know where you murdered that guy in broad daylight, and now there's an investigation because you dumped his car in the river? Well, there was a camera across the way, and it caught everything. We got to go get that." So yeah, we zoom in, and we get the first of really high tech shots of satellite images and the camera just panning and zooming across like an office space into another office, across a desk. And it's here where John Voight's character learns that his plans have been foiled. He didn't get away with murdering the senator after all. Mr. Jason Lee in this film, he's called Zavitz. He's got him on recording, and John Voight doesn't like this. He's like, this is not good. And so now Mr. Voight has been recorded doing something bad. And now he's going to go get that tape. And so this is like kind of the themes of the movie, who and how are people in power able to use this sort of like private information, you know, and how much of how does private information become public information? See, today, I mean, we're all, like I said, we're all really used to this idea because we just know we could, the possibilities out there that we could be watched and recorded at all times. Out back then, it's the idea is very new and also very scary, and what that meant for the future and for like the government and its relationship with its citizens. What does that mean? What does that mean when not only the government can access this kind of information from you, but also other governments and other people? You know, what happens when all this kind of stuff is able to get accessed? So today we kind of like are very used to those ideas and that concept, but back then when this movie comes out, a lot of those ideas are very new to the general public, and all this stuff with the like NSA and how they operate, and just the way satellites and the scope of how many things are watching you 24/7. I think all that gets exposed in this movie in a really big, broad, and entertaining way. So Jason Lee here discovers like, oh shit, like that place where there was all those cops when I picked up that tape. Something must have happened. I should have checked out that tape. So he sees on the news that something happened at that place. And he's like, oh man, I should check out that tape. So he goes back, go back. And he checks out the tape. And he's like, oh man, I got this murder perfectly clear on camera and in focus. And I have everybody's face. Everybody just turned to me at the right time. And I got this mini camera from 1998 that has like really great resolution. So this is one of the things about the movie that's kind of bullshit is not only the speed at which things get like downloaded and uploaded, but just the quality of especially video. So back then, I mean, you guys can picture video from an older cell phone, how pixelated and bad it looks, and how if things are far away or in the dark, you're not going to see anything. And in this movie, that kind of goes a little bit out the window. Cameras, if there's a camera somewhere, it's going to pick something up, whatever's in front of it, clear as day, in focus, with 4K resolution. Even though back then, I mean, you're probably dealing with like less than 520. Yeah, I mean like these mini that like for example the camera that Zavitz has, that thing wouldn't pick up anything across that lake, really. Not in focus, and it would have to be a nice bright sunny day, and can't be any obstruction of anything. And that's the case for a lot of the surveillance cameras that we see in this movie. A lot of, not only the imaging, but the satellite can't see through clouds and weather and the atmosphere. But we skip all that. All these cameras, they're never blocked by anything. I mean, I don't know how many times, like, if you tried to record something and then, oops, your finger was in the frame. That never really happens here, where there's a camera that ends up being like obstructed. but but that's not the point of the movie. The point of the movie is just kind of exposing you that Big Brother's watching, and it's watching you at all times. Who's watching? Is it a good guy or is it a bad guy? What's that bad guy going to do with your information? And so we're off and running. And so we have here Zavitz has got some information about our bad guy, John Voight. John Voight doesn't like that, so he sends his goons out there. And the goons are, you might know them, Barry Pepper and Jake Busey. They're the muscle in the movie. They're going to be like the field operators. Operators. So the goons are on to Zavitz, Jason Lee. Jason Lee realizes something's up. So he's like, I gotta get the fuck out of Dodge. Realizes all his phones have been cut off. So he's gotta get out of there. This is the only time where downloading speed becomes a thing. Kind of slows down. Still, for me, this is a little too fast. I mean, he's taking a recording of something. I mean, how many hours are on that tape? We're gonna assume it's quite a few hours because it's gonna have the morning of the senator's murder, and so all that's got to download. He downloads it pretty quick speed onto like it's not even a floppy disk. It's like I don't even know what kind of like zip drive that is. That's the other thing in this movie too. Like some of the tech that is shown in this movie isn't or wasn't always the best or lasted. So here we got bad guys chasing Jason. We got the satellite moving along here, breakneck speed. Not a video satellite, by the way. That kind of satellite wouldn't record video like this, but it's a movie, so it's okay. But just so we know, and like I said, that you wouldn't be able to reposition a satellite that fast for this type of thing, for these type of purposes. This all would all take a long time and require all kinds of permission and red tape. We don't need to know that. All we need to know that it's possible. And so the fact that it's possible and the fact that we're seeing it and the fact that it's happening in real time makes it all exciting and pretty cool, pretty fun. Again, like Tony Scott can shoot the shit out of a chase scene, and here we got like one of our first chase scenes, and it's pretty basic. You're just going down the building, across a couple buildings, across a couple streets, and into oncoming traffic. And but all this stuff is like happening. He almost gets hit by a car. There's a chopper. You got Seth Green and Jamie Kennedy in a van. They're like the young techs that are in the car, which I think like is a nice bit of flavor to the movie to have like these like younger guys be like the technicians in the van. I think back then, especially, these guys would be played or would be thought to be played by like older guys, like kind of overweight and like schlocky clothes, looking like a car salesman, just like cigarettes and bad breath and coffee. But no, they're like kind of young tech kids, from straight out of college, kind of geeky looking, kind of nerdy, dressed kind of lazy. Here's a situation where Will Smith gets to be a little funny, but also, this puts him into the story, kicks his character into the story. And so, yeah, a lot going on. We got Will Smith in the lingerie thing. You got this guy running. They're running, chasing him down the street. You got to show the guys in the van. You got to show the helicopter. You got to show what the traffic's doing. You got to show what the satellite is doing. And we have to know where everybody is at all times, really. And it all kind of like really works and clicks. I mean, Jason Lee should really already have gotten away by now on this bike running downhill in this kind of traffic. But it's we got the intensity is still getting kicked up, and so he's still being chased because he's got to get hit by this fire truck, which is a fucking bummer. I mean, poor fire truck guys, poor firemen, to just be like kind of just going to get lunch or maybe possibly going to fight another fire. Yeah, and then fucking Jason Lee comes over and fucking smashes your fucking windshield, just ruins your whole day with his stupid face. I like Jason Lee. Jason Lee's cool. But yeah, I mean, he just like he had it. He could have gotten away, but he just like jumps a curb. Like you just decide to jump the curb and that's it. I'm gonna take this Chinese bike and just fly right into the fire truck. Poor guy. And so the bad guys find the card on Zavitz. Well, we messed up here. Oh, jeez. Hang on. So bad guys here, they find the card on Zavitz. When Zavitz bumps into Will Smith in lingerie, he gives him the card. So they have to know each other for that to be able to work so that he could actually be like, hey, what's up, buddy? And then give him the card. Or else then I guess they could always find him through like the credit card purchase of at the lingerie, but that's not doesn't really visually get things going, and it's not the best way to keep the story going and let the audience know what's like really going on in an interesting way, an entertaining way. And so Will Smith is now he's a part of this little secret mission that John Voight has got going, which again is like what the movie's about. What if somebody who isn't doing the right thing has access to this kind of information? What can they do with it? How can they get you? How can they get at you? How can they like manipulate you and manipulate your world basically? And Will Smith's wife, played by Regina King, she you know she's kind of like against the government having this sort of power of being able to watch you whenever. She doesn't like it. She's like, who's watch? Why are they watching me? And who's gonna watch them? And that's her position on it. And the movie does a good job at kind of like establishing both sides of this argument and not really leaning to one side or the other, and not really making one side of the argument or the other look kind of dumb or belittling it in any kind of way. Um, you're saying that there's these arguments of this situation and they're both valid, and what do you think? And that's kind of like what the movie's doing, and that's all. And then like from there we're just gonna have a good time and watch Will Smith run, and but still like have this like really interesting question of you know your your privacy, and who has access to it, and when they have access to it, what they're able to do with that. What can they do with it? What is possible? And in this movie, they're showing you that anything's possible. Again, like I'll probably say it again, but again and again and again. But this is very new concepts and very like new things for like a broad general audience to think about. Yeah, I mean everybody had already known that you can be recorded. Obviously the FBI, was recording, the mob, and that's how they were able to kind of bring them down, and people had known about those kind of things and ways, but when it came down to how the government operated, most people kind of didn't know and really didn't want to know. And this movie kind of shows you, well, here's how it can kind of go. And I think it does a really good job, from a story perspective of like being able to like pose like a really interesting thoughtful question to an audience, and then keeping that as a thread in this, chase movie. It's a simple chase movie. It's not like rocket science to this like story, which is why I think on some of the reviews that this movie gets online, IMBD gives this movie a 7.3, which is a little bit low, but it's pretty much like the average rating for this movie across most of the rating sites. I think I would give it like an 8 out of 10. Maybe like I could see a 7.5 or high sevens, but a low 7, like 7.3, like IMBD gave it. I think that's a little low. But I think that those scores might be not really kind of putting into account like how like this story is pretty good, pretty entertaining, and does like really neat stuff. And this stuff is like not stuff that would be, the kind of like Jack Black on a computer searching somebody's files, trying to like get information about Lisa Bonet and Will Smith. How do we make that look interesting and fun and cool? And so this, Tony Scott is a master of making anything look cool. And here again, we have just people looking at computer screens, and he's just like laying down the groundwork for all these shows going forward, CSI and all these TV shows and specials and everything. This is all from like Tony Scott, and like this kind of this vision, this is like the look that he would put in his movies. Cuz like in a normal movie this wouldn't be lit this way. This is, he would light things, kind of dark, and have things more backlit. Camera moves in like very interesting ways, very interesting framing. Like this guy. Like, why is this guy like you only see like his eyes? You know that wouldn't be even Jack Black. The way he's framed, the way this is like laid out, is very very unique from the way like something else would shoot at this. This camera movement there, the way it just like tracked and panned up around this like computer desk, and then there's all these like computer and TV monitors around them that don't even probably mean or do anything. They're just there for like just to look cool, and they absolutely do look cool. And it actually looks like a place too. It looks like a lived in place. Looks look at Will Smith's house. The books are like kind of like knocked over. It doesn't look like, even the house is kind of dressed and lit and shot in a way that's, you wouldn't see just a normal house lit and shot this way. Like even the way he's able to light and shoot this house is still really interesting. So that's the master Tony Scott. We get Will Smith here. He gets to do a little comedic stuff with this dog. But still, he's still playing it very straight. He's not really leaning into the funny. Um, he's being funny, like awkward, but he's not like going for a joke. He's not trying to be like um, the center of attention here. Maybe in the beginning of the movie, I think you get a little hint of that of him, because he's like being like cocky, and Will Smith, I think, kind of he kind of keeps that when he's being that way early in his career in this movie. But then when he starts like getting like kind of all worried and freaked out, I think that's when um his acting range really shows up. And this is when a lot of people are like, "Oh wow, Will Smith, he can do drama." He can do an action drama movie. Again, Seth Green as and Jamie Kennedy as like the young tech nerds that added like a lot of like comedy and like unique flair to this movie. Them and Jack Black, and Jack Black not being like crazy wild Jack Black. He's very reserved. He's in a Tony Scott movie, young in his career, so he better be. But even then, he's not a funny guy. He's just kind of one of the guys. If anything, Jamie Kennedy and Seth Green are kind of the comic relief. You know, they're the ones like kind of going for the jokes and having a good time, and they're making fun of the fact that they have Will Smith's blender. So Will Smith's figuring out he must have something. There's some guys looking for him. He knows his way out of it. He knows the laws too, so he's able to talk people that are just going to flash a badge in his house out of the way. He's able to bat that down, and he doesn't think anything's up. He genuinely thinks they're police investigating the murder, but he knows how to handle himself around police, and so he uses that to his advantage, and he gets them out of the house. And then he goes and he looks in the bags and doesn't actually find that Zavitz dumped the 10-pound Game Gear in his bag, so he didn't feel that. So it's all good. So yeah, John Voight's going off. He's doing the he's doing like the Tommy Lee Jones from The Fugitive kind of spiel here. Like, I want him here. I want the thing. I want his urine samples. I want his porno rentals. you know, it's kind of very similar to Tommy Lee Jones going. I want to check every outhouse, townhouse, doghouse in that area. Very similar. Very similar vibe. So here we got the bad guys. They're gonna break into Will Smith's house. They're gonna plant all these bugs in there. They're gonna track him down. They're gonna record him. They're gonna follow him. And so here we get just more exposure to like all the different ways that things can be hidden and kind of put in different spots on your person in your house to like record you and monitor your every move basically. So they're showing the bad guys place things in little spots in the collar and in the belt and all these like different like weird places that you wouldn't normally expect some sort of like tracking device or recording device to be in. And then they're showing you like a lot of like little kind of spycraft kind of things here of like the guys making it look like kids robbing the house and dumping things around and like making like ransacking everything. They steal a blender, which becomes a nice running joke throughout the movie. And so they wreck the house pretty good, pretty fast. They spray paint the dog, which is hilarious then and pretty funny now. It's a little dog. It's okay. It is a washout. So Will Smith calls the police. He's like, "Hey man, kids broke into my house, but this is how the John Voight's bad guys are able to kind of stay in the house with, you know, police footage and body cams. Actually, I don't think back then there's any body cams, but they're just able to know that, he's there and he's only got one suit, and that's what they kind of wanted. That's the result that they wanted. And so it's just, again, movies just playing with themes of like your home being invaded, and all your stuff being fucked with and messed around, and people rummaging through your stuff. And you know you could say all you want how you're not doing anything wrong, like it's okay for you to be you know spied on, or looked at in this kind of way, but this is still like very invasive and very just like not cool to like be be watched or messed with in this way. And so I think the movie's showing you how extreme um that all this stuff can kind of go. It's one thing to say that somebody's personal space was invaded, but it's another thing to like, you have to be able to show the bad guys touching and grabbing Will Smith's stuff and moving it around, because for the audience it's like a visual thing of, now okay, we're seeing, like we're thinking of like, what if that's my cell phone, what if that's my belt. That's, it's all very simple things that we all have, and all these things can just be like fucked with very easily and manipulated, and then you know next thing you know, your life's kind of turned upside down unknowingly. And so this is kind of the start of the bad guys really breaking down and manipulating Will Smith's life so that they could kind of you know put him into a corner and kind of get what they need out of him. And a lot of really eye-opening stuff to see, like how quick and how fast somebody's life can get like upturned, um just like in a couple like different little different ways, very simple ways. At work, at home, with your work colleagues, your friends, ex-friends, in this case Will Smith's ex-girlfriend, you know messing with the dog. You don't mess with his kids in this movie, so I stay away from that. But yeah, they're just being able to, your whole life is able to be accessed and messed with. And so here we get Will Smith really putting it out there and getting getting angry. So this is, like I said, this is where we get Will Smith really showing some acting chops, and not just being Will Smith, I'm going to make funny, but Will Smith, I'm going to slam my hand on the table, and I'm going to, you know, I'm going to make a stand for myself. I'm not going to just sit there and get fired. Like, he's not going to stand for this sort of thing to happen to him. And so he's a reluctant hero, but in this film, but he's not a pushover. I like that about his character in this movie. He's an everyday man. I mean, he's a lawyer, but in general, he's kind of like your everyday guy. Family guy, wife, kids. Just kind of works day to day. Has a good job though, and it has a good head on his shoulders. Very, so he's smart. And so I think the audience can relate to that, because we don't want to relate to like somebody that's dumb. And so he's very smart, he's capable, and yeah, and then, when these things happen, he doesn't just fold over. He kind of like wants to, know why and what's going on and how, like, to stop it. And he uses his wits and he uses his, like, brains to get through all these, like, different, like, scenarios. And so here it's all falling apart and he's trying to figure it out, but his wife is hysterical. Which I always was like, come on, lady, like, you're getting a little. I mean, you gotta understand, like, he. I guess they're saying that he's cheated on her before with Lisa Bonet, and so, they work things out, and now her seeing this talk of Lisa Bonet popping up again, she's not having it. So she's like, they have a nice little argument, which is necessary because they have to have this big argument for him to get kicked out of the house and for him to, like, kind of like go on his own. So this is like kind of like his Luke Skywalker moment where he's got to leave the home and go off and fight and join the rebellion. So yeah, he doesn't quite join the rebellion, but he's off on his own, and yeah, nothing's working, and he needs some sort of help. But John Voight is just, they're just really messing with him. And at this point, you're kind of like, you're seeing Will Smith kind of be a little dicky to this lady, and he's just coming unhinged. And it's here, like, you're able to see, like, his range where, like, this is a frustrated man. This is not somebody who's, like, messing around. This is not funny. This is serious. This is scary. And, you know, we as an audience, like, you have to be able to believe that. You can't, like, this can't be played as a joke. And so he does a really good job in this movie. Um, kind of getting that through. But still being likable. He's still able to be likable because we understand his frustration. That part where he's like, "Where's my bag?" And even though he's being a dick to the lady, like, he's just so confused. We're kind of like laughing at him. Again, like these shots of, like, just guys in a room staring at a, you know, um, a mark, chalkboard, or like looking at a screen or looking at maps. There's just scenes of people just sitting around, and Tony Scott is just shooting the shit out of it. And the dialogue is very good. The dialogue is very snappy. It's giving you information. It's pushing the narrative along. Good writing. That's like what I mean. Like, where, this movie is not rocket science. It's not, you know tugging at your heartstrings or anything like that. But to be thought provoking, and then also entertaining, and then also funny, and then also informative, those all very hard things to do, and for to retain people's attention in a big budget movie like this, where you want to entertain everybody. Rated. I think this is rated R. Yeah, this is rated R. So Will Smith is still not hip to, like, obviously, that he's being watched by the NSA or anything like that. He thinks it's the mob, maybe the FBI, but something's going on, and he's trying to get to the bottom of it. So he contacts Lisa Bonet. Lisa Bonet is like an ex-girlfriend who has contacts that are useful to him and his career, and so he keeps in touch with her so that he could basically, get information on clients and things like that. So they've kept a relationship through the years, this sort of like secret working relationship. Now it's exposed. His wife's pissed off. He's on the run. He's like, "Hey, Lisa, help me out. What's going on? Is Cosby following me? Is the mob? Tom Sizemore? Tony Soprano? What's going on?" And she's like, "I don't know. Maybe it's Seth Green." So they're trying to figure it out. He's trying to get information out of her of like who her like secret contact is. She has a secret contact that is able to get her like all this like crazy like secret information, and so he like wants to know like who is this guy. So, and this guy ends up turning out to be Gene Hackman, who is like an ex NSA guy, and so he's like the old school of John Voight. So he knows a lot of the old school tactics of the NSA, and he's able to kind of operate on his own, and he's off the grid, and he's kind of like an enigma. And Will Smith is like, "Hey, I got to get a hold of this guy. Maybe he can find out what's going on. Maybe he knows what's going on." So he needs answers. And so maybe this guy Brill, Elisa Bonet knows, maybe he can find the answers, or maybe you know he could at least tell him what's going on, because he has at this point he doesn't even know he has anything on him. He's just like, I'm being messed with. I don't know why. Sorry, taking a drink there. So a little bit of trade craft going here of marking, mailboxes and planting notes, and then waiting for a pickup, and then getting another letter dropped off. This is all kind of stuff that like actually happens. They actually consulted like real CIA and NSA operative, and I think actually the official consultant in this movie was a SEAL team member, um, Mr. Humphreys. I forget his first name, but he's a consultant for a lot of movies for like this kind of like spy stuff, see like special operative stuff. And I'm not sure. I know he did. I think he worked on some of the Jason Bourne movies. But here we got Gabriel Byrne in a little small part. Another big name actor just popping up in a Tony Scott movie. I mean, everybody that has a speaking role in this movie is a pretty big name. Like, could like be a second or first lead in a TV show or like a smaller movie. And they're here in this like just playing like a little bit part, like a little extra parts in this big Hollywood movie. Like Jack Black and Seth Green, those guys, they're all like young in their career, but Gabriel Byrne is a known actor at that time, and this is a very like little quick small role for him, but it's pretty key. It's pretty important, and this I think it adds to like us thinking that Will Smith can be easily confused that this is Brill, because in the when this movie came out with the trailers and everything, that Gene Hackman it ends up being Brill and is the guy that Will Smith is looking for. Now in the narrative of the story, this guy just pops up and this guy could be Brill, and so with the trailers and all the promotional footage, that not to be the case. But I think making like adding an actor like this with like Gabriel Byrne's like background, him popping up in this way, you're kind of like, oh shit, it's Gabriel Byrne. And so when he pops up and he's saying that he's Brill, you're like, okay, well, all right, maybe he is Brill, or maybe he's gonna act like he's Brill, but something's going on. And so that happens. He ends up pretending that he's Gene Hackman, and the audience buys it at first. You believe that Will Smith can be like duped into like thinking this is Brill, and so you're him being in this movie and being like a name, and he shows up, you're kind of like tricked into like thinking that the movie's going to go in a slightly different direction than you thought it might. When the scene starts to pop up, because like when Will Smith starts to say that he's going to go look for Gene Hackman, like obviously you're like, okay, well in the next couple scenes Gene Hackman's going to pop up. And so like when Gabriel Byrne pops up and says that he's Brill, you automatically are not like, he's not Brill. This is gonna be like a part where Will Smith is tricked. You're kind of like, you know, knocked off your track a little bit, and it's unexpected and it keeps you on your toes. And as an audience member, it's a good way to like be in a movie, just kind of like on your toes and thinking of what's gonna happen next, and knowing how maybe things are going to work, but then it turning out different. I think because all that is like really surprising and fun for an audience, to watch something like that and have it unfold that way. Because the scene eventually ends up doing what it said it was going to do, and it's going to take Will Smith to meet Gene Hackman, bro. And we're going to have the scene where was played a lot in like production promotional images and like TV spots and trailers, was this conversation that they have on top of the roof, them yelling at each other and him asking, what do they want from me? What are they doing? And Gene Hackman is like, you got something. And Will Smith is like, I don't even know. And then that's like kind of like the scary premise of the movie, is that you could be chased and not know what you even have or why you're being chased. Like your whole life could be just uprooted for no reason. Like you won't even know. I love how like grumpy Gene Hackman is in this movie. He's always just like very or like just like a angry old man, just like always like just annoyed and just always like kind of hangry, you know, which I even think he says. So Gene Hackman is like, he's an old ex NSA spy, so he knows where some of these tracking devices would be. So he's going through and taking them all out. And Will Smith's like, "Oh shit, it's happening. I'm being tracked in my shoes and my belt and this and that." But there's still there's still a couple devices left, and again, the editing and the direction by Tony Scott to be able to like balance all these things together and have it like all feel like very streamlined and make sense is just really underappreciated, I think, to a modern day audience. Like, and also in a storytelling aspect is very hard to like go between these guys in the van and Gene Hackman and Will Smith, because it's like, what do you need the guys in the van for? What do we need to cut between them for? There is some information that they are giving you, and as an audience and in the story, they're as characters they go somewhere. This little team of guys, like they kind of end up like messing up and then having to like redeem themselves and then messing up again. I love how Gene Hackman goes, "You're kind of a jerk, aren't you?" Will Smith is like, "Really?" I'm in no mood. And they're just both yelling at each other. And again, it looks great. It looks great. Like Tony Scott knows how to like just make this work of like these guys on top of a like this could be shot anywhere. This could be done anywhere, but Tony Scott picks a roof with satellites and a helicopter and guys in a van and it makes it look all really really good and it like the whole thing really feels very energetic and like just the end your adrenaline's pumping as they're yelling at each other. I think the guys in the van add a little element of like you're able to breathe when you see the guys in the van. That's what they add. And they add like, some obvious exposition and like explain like what is actually happening and what technology is being used and what they're doing with it. So they're really just kind of like delving a lot of information. Like that's their whole like really purpose in the movie, other than chasing Will Smith. But narratively, their purpose in the movie, why we keep cutting back to them, um, is so that the audience is aware of what the hell's going on and how and where the bad guys are. Which I think gets lost in a lot of modern day movies of like we need to keep the audience needs to be aware where the bad guy is in relation to our hero, because or else there's no threat, and if we lose that threat, we lose kind of interest in following the hero because we're like, well, the hero's not in jeopardy, or we're not really seeing the hero go do anything, and so like a good villain's always necessary for a good hero, not because they're able to play off each other, but also because narratively and like within the story of the structure of the story, things just make sense and things are just like balanced. And in your head, you want to follow along this little thread. In these little beats, you want to follow the hero and you're concerned about it because at this point where a villain or villains are. And so here we get a little funny part where Will Smith's stripping and, Korean ladies like, woo. She's flipping out. She's starting to she takes like bills from her husband and is like, let's go. We're going to make it rain for Mr. Will Smith. So definitely a chance to get Will Smith in like his underwear and jumping across some buildings here, or at least some like balconies. Which credit to Will Smith, I think he does a lot of like his own stunts. I mean, obviously he's not on the balcony of the building here, but he's doing a lot of dangerous stuff in this movie. We'll see later on. Like obviously that's not him. Like scaling the roof. But there are some shots of him like here. Like I'm sure that it's all really well cut too. No CGI, all done practically. No reason there was no reason for any CGI there. Not a crazy stunt either, just like kind of simple, but just in terms of like the normalcy of like what's going on in the movie, we know that Will Smith's not like an action hero, but now he's in action hero mode being chased, and we're on board. And then I don't know about all those lighters being in the same storage room with a bunch of chemicals, but let's go with it. There's not too many faux pas like that in this movie, so when there's like stuff like that that like keeps happening over and over again, things like that kind of like stick out more. But that's a little small one. I mean, I don't even think you could pick up on something like that in even after a second viewing. So again, a lot of good stuff, lot of stuff going on here with a fire. You know, you got these guys coming in. This is all like really takes a long time to like set up and shoot, and it's all very expensive. And we're just like, it's just like a blip in this movie. So like Tony Scott is just like able to like do a lot with very little. And so again, Will Smith is just like, I need to get out of this situation. So here, when are you really using our brains? He's just like kind of like, I need to like, I need to be assertive and tell everybody to stop and just get out of my way. And so he's got to point the gun. And so, he's not being like a nice guy. He has to like kind of, he like, I bet you today, like they would probably put in like him like saying sorry to those guys, or, but no, he's got to like tell them to stop the car and like get the fuck out of there. I like this Camaro that these guys are driving. And is it a Camaro or a Thunderbird? Let me know in the comments. So the bad guys are chasing Will Smith. He's in a tunnel, getting chased. Again, another chase scene. This is a longer chase scene. More stuff going on in the first one, but definitely a big, big, big chase scene. We go from a lot of different places. So here in the tunnel, there's a part here where Will Smith actually. So here he traverses down into like a access tunnel underneath the tunnel. Yeah. So okay. So they describe it in the movie as a sub ventilation tunnel, right? So Will Smith goes down into the sub ventilation tunnel, and now, uh, this sub ventilation tunnel is, you can tell like you shouldn't be able to get a car in there or fit cars in there or drive a car into it and get out of it properly. But in the movie, we get the cars in there and they're relentless. Now, in actuality, what they did in the movie, the filmmakers, there was no way to get a car in there, and there was no way to even fit the cars to get in there. And so what they had to do was actually they had to split these cars up in like different sections. I think in like three different sections each car, and then put them together in the tunnel, and then have them function, work, chase Will Smith, stunt. Will Smith gets out, and then boom, that's the scene. And all that for a scene that's like maybe, 30 seconds, if that. But again, it's like doing a lot with very little, and a lot of like, no, normally nobody would be like trusted to be able to like handle something like that, because like a scene like that would have to be like a big set piece. But in the Tony Scott, Jerry Bruckheimer movie, something like that is just like a like little side step, like a little side stunt. But it makes the trailer. That scene of him running down that tunnel, that tight tunnel, with those cars like sideways and like kind of like not fitting in the tunnel and splashing around. Like that's all good stuff. No reason, but it just looks good and just adds to a chase scene. It's fine. Works. Nobody can't complain. Yeah, it looks like no, like those cars can't fit in there. In the audience, you don't really know that. You know something's up, like something could happen. But here we got Anna Gunn as John Voight's like trophy wife. He's drinking like a glass of milk before bed. So Jack Black, Seth Green are watching the house. Regina King's all by herself. Now we don't know, but she snuck into Will Smith's Christmas presents, grabbed his Christmas present, and then was like, "You know what? I'm mad at him. I'm gonna put this on. I'm gonna put on his Christmas present, and I'm gonna wear it and do whatever. I'm just gonna wear it." And as she's wearing it, Will Smith pops up. He's like, "Yo, what's up?" And we get a good scene here between them. This is like the kind of like couple, like let's they gotta make up, and so she's got to be like kind of standoffish. And he's got to plead his case. And even though he's in like this crazy dire situation, he's still a married man with a wife, and he's got to be accountable and responsible for making a happy wife, happy life, and which is like a nice touch in this movie. Him, it's kind of like almost like a Peter Parker type of thing, of where you know Peter Parker is going through this craziness as Spider-Man, and then yet he's still got to make sure he gets home and gets like the applesauce back to Aunt May, or else Aunt May is going to be like, "Hey, I told you to go out and get applesauce. What's going on?" He can't be like, "Hey, Aunt May, stick that applesauce up your ass. I was fighting Doctor Octopus. Give me a break." No, you can't do that. It's Aunt May. You gotta somehow get that applesauce. So Will Smith's like, "Hey, babe, um, give me a break about the applesauce. Why are you wearing?" Well, first off, they're like, he's about to get it. He's like, "Oh, we're gonna get it on in this garage right now, right?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure." And then he's like, "Oh, wait." He's like, "I remember seeing that on another woman." It's like, "I bought that for you." And she's like, "I was gonna wear it. I was lonely." Which I don't know what that means. Like, what's she gonna do with that? So she's saying that she's wearing it. And he's like, "Oh shit." He's like, "The fucking lingerie place." He's like, and it all comes back to him that, uh, Zavitz dropped this huge Game Gear in his bag that he forgot about, and that that's a possible thing that could be the reason why people are looking for him. He's almost certain. And so we got the guys like kind of watching Will Smith. Will Smith is getting nice and crafty and smart here, and he's using the babysitter to pick up the kids, and he's hiding in the back seat, and he like he's operating like a man being watched at all times. And it's not going to be perfect. You know that he might get caught, or something might happen because he's still at the end of the day is just kind of like a regular dude. I mean, look how good like Tony Scott can make. I'm gonna keep praising Tony Scott because the way he can make a city look, this car, this station wagon. I mean, this is 1998. There's no reason to have like the type of cars that get shot in this movie. So like the El Camino, this Bronco, um, the other Bronco that we see, you know, sorry, not the Bronco, this station wagon and the Bronco that we saw earlier. Later on, we'll see another truck that does a nice older truck. The two like Camaros or Firebirds that we saw in the tunnel. You know, those are not cars that are of that day. And Tony Scott's purposely picks those cars because they look of their look, and he puts them in this movie on purpose. And so in this movie, like in this scene here, the station wagon is definitely like an on purpose thing. This the cage, Will Smith and like laying in this big back seat. The wood panel station wagon. I mean, this is you don't see those today. You didn't see those back then. Those were in 1998. Those weren't around that much back then either. I don't even know what kind of disc that is. So, yeah, Will Smith is just really just using his brains and kind of getting after it and taking a stand against these bozos. And he's actually gonna start using little tricks against them and trying to like disrupt their little like daily ongoings. And so he's starting to like fight back and like get back at them and just make little disruptions. And the way he's able to do that, which in keeping with the themes of the movie, is he's able to like use the police, which is a means of a type of surveillance in a city. And he calls them and he's like, "Hey, something's going on. Can you guys go watch this and keep an eye on this thing that I'm worried about?" And in doing that, he just the bad guys have to like get out of like where they're at because they're not supposed to be there. And so he kind of uses the system against them. And he knows that they're listening. He knows that they'll leave. He's not gambling on whether or not they stay or leave. He knows that they'll leave. And so he knows that they're listening, and so he's using his knowledge that they're listening, and he's using that against them, as well as using like the police and police radio and surveillance against them. We kill off Lisa Bonet for no reason. Straight up bummer. This part's a little because I mean now his fingerprints are everywhere. This all is gonna look really bad. But at this point, he's got to like he's got no choice. He's got to like fully clear his name, which I guess that's why they had to kill her because at this point he's got no choice. He's implicated in a murder. Before like he could have like maybe uprooted his life. At least he still had his kids and his wife. Now, now he could be implicated in murder, and this is not good. So now he has to really enact some sort of plan. Whereas before I think he was just trying to like survive and just get out of get out of Dodge and maybe find out what's going on and report it to some authorities. But now he's like, oh, this is like I can't go to the police. I have really nowhere to run here. So he's a desperate man. So he goes back to Brill, Gene Hackman, and Gene Hackman's like, "What the fuck are you doing? I told you to stay away from me." Will Smith's like, "Dude, I had a hell of a day. You're in El Camino? Okay, you're in El Camino. Take me somewhere." And so, it being a Tony Scott movie, they go to this dope ass warehouse by the train tracks, which is basically where like Gene Hackman could like stay off the grid and kind of not be tracked down by anybody or anything. But at the same time, he cuts himself off from a life, family, relationships, people, you know, which is there's no way to live. So, um, it's kind of like posing that question of, do you live like kind of like in fear, like Brill, or do you just live your life like kind of like Will Smith wants to do? He just wants to live a life. He doesn't even care that if they're watching him. He just wants to be left alone. So Brill here, he's not quite there yet. He's like, people are watching you. You gotta like take measures, and I gotta stay off the grid and not be tracked down or have any attachments. And so his one attachment gets messed with, which was Lisa Bonet. And so him and Will Smith have like this like kind of common goal here of wanting to take a stand against the people that did this and are trying to, mess with their lives and messing with the things that they care about. One, two, three. Yeah. So Will Smith's character is just letting Gene Hackman know that he's being framed. He's got nowhere to go. He's he knows that Gene Hackman had a relationship with um his ex girlfriend, and so they're off and they're gonna maybe try to find out why they're chasing after him, if anything, and maybe just try to like clear his name and try to just find out what's going on so that he could be safe at least. Gene Hackman probably knows that this is probably not going to end for Will Smith. That he's probably just going to have to go on the run, like he was. Will Smith's not. Later on he'll tell Brill that this is his life and he wants it back. He's not going to stand for these people messing with him and discrediting him and all of that. So, but right now he's desperate. He's kind of mourning. So they're kind of off and they get to this little shop here and Brill shows that he gets like these little snacks just because he needs snacks. But also, what's funny is everything that he uses is kind of purposeful. So like he the brand of potato chips he's getting is specific so that he could, if anything ever happens like what happened before with Will Smith, he could take the tracking devices and kind of throw them inside this little bag, and the aluminum sealing or whatever in the bag can kind of scramble the any kind of signal that might be giving out to anybody that's following them. So the bad guys, Barry Pepper and John Voight's men, they get a beat on they were just at a convenience store and or like a gas station. And so they're like, let's check the tapes. And so like here, this kind of stuff of them getting to the place and you know getting the tapes from this store, it happens pretty quickly. This kind of thing might even take a whole day. And if the store wanted to be a pain in the ass, they could probably not have to give up those tapes right away. The NSA, this is like a black ops sort of thing that's happening, so they don't really have jurisdiction to just go grabbing stuff. But they're just out there just flashing their badge and abusing their power, which is what the movie's about, right? The movie knows that, John Voight is going above and beyond what somebody would ultimately really do, even if their back was against the wall. But again, it's a movie, and we just have to convey that, like, this is like the sort of thing that can happen if this sort of power is in the wrong hands, right? And what happens when somebody has this much power, what they can do with it, and what they can get away with. And so they're getting away with fucking with my man Will Smith here. So here, Gene Hackman Brill tells Will Smith they're in his little hideout here. It's just like this old factory. Well, yeah, it's his hideout. He calls it his office. So it's this old building, and he says that it's kind of sealed off with a bunch of copper wiring and fencing and all kinds of shit that like is blocking any kind of transmission that might be coming in. Now I kind of miss how they were able to get this sort of like read on how they followed him from the gas station to his safe house. Yeah. So then Gene Hackman is just explaining to Will Smith that it's a brave new world and that like all this technology is capable of being monitored and tracked and record you and tell them your whereabouts and all this really scary stuff. So, real quick, I'm not sure if we mentioned the editor and director of photography earlier, but this movie is edited by Chris Lebenson, who's actually a really like just a big time editor in the business. This guy's probably been a part of some of the biggest movies. Just to run down, I checked on his Wikipedia page. So Top Gun Maverick, Dumbo, Geostorm, Maleficent, Frankenweenie, Dark Shadows, Alice in Wonderland, Unstoppable, which was a Tony Scott movie, Taking the Pelham 123, Tony Scott movie, Sweeney Todd, Aragon, Deja Vu, Corpse Bride. So we got a lot of Tim Burton and Tony Scott movies. Big Fish, another Tim Burton. Triple X, Planet of the Apes, Pearl Harbor, Gone in 60 Seconds, which we watched and did a commentary on. Go see it. Armageddon, Con Air, Mars Attacks, Crimson Tide, Ed Wood. I mean, it just keeps going. Batman Returns. I mean, he really likes Tim Burton. Days of Thunder, Tony Scott, Hudson Hawk, The Last Boy Scout, Midnight Run, Revenge, Beverly Hills Cop 2. This guy owes his life to Tony Scott and Tim Burton. I mean, what a great two guys to just be associated with and be like, okay, these two guys are gonna give me gigs for the rest of my life. Weird Science, A Breed Apart, The Outsiders, One from the Heart. These two are from Francis Ford Coppola, so these are his assistant editing jobs. No wonder his first like job as an editor was Wolfen, 1981, which is not bad. So that's Chris Levinson. So that's who's editing this. And so you can see that this movie requires some great editing and pulls off some really good editing. And there's a reason why. And it's because Chris Levinson is just the man. And did not disappoint in this because there's a lot of cutaways and a lot of stuff going on between satellite imaging and them being followed, where the bad guys are, where Will Smith and Gene Hackman are. Like all this stuff has to relate to each other, and never once are you like kind of confused on what's happening or where people are going. Even here, you're able to see what the cameras that they're looking at to tell like where the bad guys are at. So Gene Hackman is aware where they're at in the building. With all these people staring at screens, they could be anywhere, really. If you when you shoot and cut from scene to scene, you could be confused and think they're like back in the van, but we're constantly reminded of just like the different like the the uniqueness of everything is kind of what gives all this away. And that's why, he uses things like an El Camino as like the hero car, is because like when they're in the El Camino, that it's very distinctive that this is the good guy car. This is the hero car. And that Bronco, that big burly Bronco, that's the bad guy car. That green Bronco, that's another bad guy car. And so and all the sets are the same way too. They're all very distinctive. Where like in the van, all the computer screens are like almost on top of all the guys, and they're kind of looking. Here we have like, well, I gotta like stop and just mention this explosion because this is the coolest explosion. And he says he blows up the building because he makes a phone call. That's our lives today, people. You make a phone call, next thing you know, a building might get blown up. That's a true story. So yeah, they're getting chased. There's a little chase scene going here. Again, Tony Scott knows how to make a good chase scene because it's set. We're in a train yard. There's trains passing by in each direction. We got like a game of chicken going here. The car gets set on fire, for some reason, kind of like, in The Simpsons, things just get hit enough, things will just light on fire or explode. Going back to the explosion, and oh man, let's see, and then we get this truck flipping over here. Just massive stunt of the flipping this truck over end. Even Gene Hackman's like, holy shit, that's crazy. And they're driving in, the car's still on fire. And then here's another stunt where like, the flames shoot inside the car, and then we got, a little nice little flame stunt where Will Smith gets set on fire. But all that's not done for nothing because, it's not like it's not just cuz everything goes on fire. Things go on fire, and then next thing you know, they have to ditch the car, and the disc that they have is basically ruined, and so they have to come up with a new plan. And then they're out there, they're on the run, and they're on foot, and they basically got nothing. Back to square one together. Tony Scott shooting the shit out of this chase scene, just like, let me add in a helicopter. And you would never think like how to make something like that look so dynamic like this, and he's able to do it. This coal mine field. It's like this quarry that they're in. These great shots of like this helicopter pilot is just flying his ass off right now. So we're talking about the photography and the explosions and the stunts. Let's talk about the photography. Dan Mindell, director of photography. Again, this guy starts off with Tony Scott in this movie. Started off with his brother Ridley Scott in some movies in the early 80s, or sorry, in like the early 90s. right? And then so he does Enemy of the State with Tony Scott, hangs around with Tony Scott for Spy Game, Domino, then J.J. Abrams, okay, picks him up and they do Mission Impossible 3, and then he's just J.J. Abrams guy. He does Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness. He does Star Wars, The Force Awakens, which everybody's got their problems with, but Star Wars The Force Awakens does look pretty good. And so does oh well so he doesn't do The Last Jedi. He does The Rise of Skywalker. Which The Rise of Skywalker I'm not really crazy about how the photography in that looks, amongst other things in that movie. And he does Twisters, Red One, and he's going to be doing Godzilla and Kong, Supernova, another Godzilla and Kong movie. So back to Enemy of the State here. We're on the run. Our characters kind of have like a come to Jesus moment where are they going to separate or are they going to stay together? And they decide to stay together. Excuse me, stay together. Get a little mad at each other. Gene Hackman punches the shit out of Will Smith, knocks him on his butt, and Will Smith sticks a shotgun in his face. And Will Smith sticks Gene Hackman's own shotgun in his own face. Gene Hackman gives him a shotgun to defend themselves, and then Will Smith is like, "How about this? How about I shoot you because I need you to help me, or I shoot you." And Gene Hackman's just like, "I'll punch you in the face." So here Gene Hackman's telling him he's hyperglycemic and he gets all cranky. They gotta go eat. Will Smith's like, "Oh, so you're paying the ass, huh? Well, let's go eat." Kind of dick, but I guess funny. So we get a picture here of John Voight and his assistant here, and they are looking at Gene Hackman's kind of background, and there's a picture of Gene Hackman, what looks like Gene Hackman in The Conversation, which is kind of what his character is loosely based off of. It's kind of a, like a maybe a hidden successor to his character in The Conversation. Not really, but it's in the same vein. Not quite the same connection that you can make with Sean Connery's character in The Rock, right? So in The Rock, Sean Connery character is like a spy who ends up getting caught and then sent to prison, and then Nicolas Cage has to break him out, and the Rock happens. Now that is a little closer where you could make the connection to is Sean Connery's character in that film supposed to be like James Bond? Can you make that connection? Are they in the same world? So, and in this movie, can you make the same connection where is Gene Hackman's character connected to his own character in The Conversation, Francis Ford Coppola's not really spy movie, but it's definitely like a thriller, a little bit of a political thriller, but more of like a thriller. And it doesn't deal with like the political aspect of surveillance, but it just deals with surveillance in general and just everyday people being able to be followed and kind of it almost goes into like that telephone aspect of information, that game Telephone, where just information getting passed through from person to person to person ends up getting just convoluted. So things like that happen. Other themes in that movie happen too, such as well, Gene Hackman and Will Smith are just rattling on about what they're going to do next here. So we're not missing anything. Good conversation, good dialogue. But anyway, the conversation also has themes of like in the Rear Window where we have a character who's kind of observing something and kind of not getting the full context of the situation and kind of thinking it's something that it's not, um, and kind of acting on it and causing a lot of trouble. And Rear Window is also kind of been repurposed as the movie Disturbia. So that whole concept might seem more familiar to you guys if you think about the movie Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf, where he oversees and overhears something across the way and makes him think one thing. So back to Enemy State, we got the guys. They're gonna use their knowledge of surveillance and how the NSA works and try to use these kind of things against them and try to discredit them and try to do all the things that they were doing to them. A lot of what we were talking over there was just some character building amongst Will Smith and Gene Hackman, which is really good. And it kind of like Will Smith is holding his own with Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman's a great actor and really just showing like how he's just making this look really easy and really carrying Will Smith. Will Smith is kind of he's able to like lean on himself being Will Smith and how charismatic Will Smith is, but he's leaning on that, which is he's able to be charismatic enough, but Gene Hackman's kind of carrying him in like a dramatic aspect. Like we let's not do just funny. So yeah, here they're using like information that they're getting and kind of scrambling it and manipulating it and using it to just cause disruption. You know, not everything things are not what you see. One of the things that he tells them that's a really great analogy is just that they got to use their weakness to their advantage. Um, he tells them he's using an example of like back when he was in Vietnam or Korea and just used to use guerrilla warfare tactics of like if you're small and they're big, you know, you could be mobile and they're like too big and cumbersome and slow and you're fast and you could be hidden and they're too big and they're exposed. So that is a great way to like look at their how they're using their weaknesses to like a great strength. And so that's what they're doing here. They know they can't really necessarily bring these bad guys down. They're too powerful and they have too much resources. But what they could at least do is that just kind of like just nitpick at them enough to the point where maybe they can get like some sort of like sit down or meeting or just you know come up with something else. And so here they blackmail the senator, not or yeah, they record the senator doing some naughty stuff with a young lady in a hotel room, and so they record it, and they're kind of like gonna blackmail him into doing kind of what they want. And again, they're doing it and not trying to be sneaky about it. They're trying to do it and so that they know that they'll be found out. Very like very good stuff. Very good like back and forth stuff. This film was like written really tight. As I said before, the writer was David Marconi, who is sole writer on this, a screenwriter on this, but may have had some help and some ghostwriters. But as far as research goes, it says that he was working on this for about 2 years under Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson. Um, and they were just really developing this whole thing for about 2 years. So they really had a long time to really just go over this little simple story and kind of just really tighten it up, which is like really the great thing and the benefit of making your story very simple and formulaic sounds bad, but it's true. Like if you just stick to the formula, you are able to expand and kind of add your own things and do some really great stuff. And that's what this movie is a great example of. Is this is just simple stuff. This is really simple chase movie, but it does it takes all these like new ideas of like surveillance and counter surveillance and like like how politics and media and citizens are all kind of like intertwined in this new world of cameras and recording and the internet, which doesn't really we don't really talk about too much in this movie, like the power of the internet and like the accessibility of it and how the NSA is using it. We don't really get into that in this movie, um, but it's kind of there a little bit. I honestly think themes like that might have been, it's hard to like explain how back in 1998 how a lot of this stuff is like very new concepts, but right around the corner, everything changes and our understanding of it is way more clear and a lot more closer to like what we think today. So here in this scene, we have the bad guys. They're getting found out. John Voight's character, he's got a boss. He actually works somewhere, and his boss is finding out that something funny's going on, and what the hell's going on, and it's because Gene Hackman and Will Smith have caused disruption, and so now it's kind of on John Voight, and it's that ass, and so now he's got to try to meet their demands. He's got to play their game now. And so they're gonna play the game. Gene Hackman is kind of arranging a meeting where they're gonna try to like at least clear their name in exchange for whatever information they're trying to chase down. Now, unfortunately, Gene Hackman should know better that that's probably not going to work. Like John Voight's going to end up, not letting that fly. He's not going to just let them go that easy. They are making it that he might have to, but he's way too powerful and just obviously he's not thinking clearly, and he's probably just going to follow the same pattern of killing people to get what he wants. And he's not above that. And again, that's what the movie's about. Just what happens when this kind of stuff gets in the wrong hands, or when the wrong hands get their hands on this type of power. So then here we go. The tables are turned, and Will Smith gets to kind of be the watcher and surveil what's going on. Gene Hackman gets to put on, a fake badge and kind of pretend to be an authority. Right? They're behind a fence. They're kind of blocked off so that Gene Hackman is protected. And now the tables are totally turned. And so Will Smith gets to be the watcher, and he does like this stuff is really all really good stuff by Will Smith. He's like all really intense and like kind of like confused. And it's really hard, like that's not easy to kind of make that look and convey all this stuff cuz he's just like staring out a window. So kudos to Will Smith. Even though he's always given Gene Hackman and Chris Rock a hard time. He does a good job in this movie. He does a good job in a lot of movies. Like I said, before this, he was more doing comedic roles. And this was like his first dramatic turn. And so after this, you know, he gets a lot more a lot more roles, a lot more dramatic roles. He gets, after he goes on to do like Ali, just a bunch of he just ends up having his Will Smith career. So here, Gene Hackman's kind of going off the rails here. Not sure if he's doing it on purpose or if he's just kind of just being erratic. But so he's talking to Gene Hackman and he's trying to like distract them so they can kind of get Gene Hackman to confess in a way. Um, they're also against the clock, right? They know that they can't be recording for too long, or else the bad Gene, like John Voight's character, the goons are gonna get a beat on where they're at, and so Will Smith's got to get out of there. They're trying to get the information that they need. They don't get the information, and so he ends up having to bail out. But Jake Busey catches him hardcore, and so yeah, when it rains, it pours, and so it's raining now, pouring like it only can pour in a Tony Scott movie, yeah, or in a Ridley Scott movie for that matter. And Will Smith, and Mr. Gene Hackman are caught up, and they're in the van. And it doesn't look good. It looks like this could be in the road. So yeah, Will Smith kind of taking the piss out of John Voight a little bit there about how his day's just not going good. Everything's getting fucked with. His wife's pissed off. You know, all this information that they gathered, they used against him, and manipulated it, and kind of made the truth. He manipulated the truth. So now everything comes to a head. All our characters are together. A lot of great, great, great characters in a van right now. And Dan Mindell and Chris Levinson and Tony Scott and Gene Hackman and John Voight and Will Smith and all these guys are just now they're just doing a damn thing in a van, and they're just like, "Where's the tape?" And it's all very intense. And you're like, "Man, John Voight is losing his fucking cool here." And Gene Hackman's also crazy. Will Smith Will Smith is just like kind of your everyday man. Like he just wants to get out of there. Like he's like, what? Why is everybody just acting so nuts? And we get this little call back to the blender. So Will Smith has something planned, and we go to his plan is where I'm gonna like explain the plan before it all goes down because it all happens like pretty quick. So the plan is he's gonna bring the bad guys to the mobsters that he's been dealing with. The mobsters that he's been has a case against them where he's representing a client who basically I guess got strong armed by the mob. And so he's building a case, and he's has some incriminating evidence against the mob. And he's earlier in the movie he told the mob like, "Hey, I got this evidence, got this videotape, right? More tapes, more videos. This tape of you doing some bad shit, and it doesn't look good, right? Appearances. And so this, in a court of law, this could be used against you." So homeboy Tom Sizemore, mafia guy, is like, "Nah, I want that tape." He's like, "I'm taking this copy, and you better give me your copy in a couple days." And we forget about all that. We forget that Will Smith has got a day job, and he put himself in that shitty ass position. And Will Smith's like, "Oh yeah, I got to give that tape back. What about that tape? I got other problems." He's like, "Why don't I solve both problems at the same time?" So he's like, "I'm gonna send in John Voight. They're looking for a tape. So is Tom Sizemore and his guys. They're looking for a tape. Let's see what happens if they both just start asking questions to each other." He knows that Tom Sizemore is, you know, hardcore gangster. He's not going to get bullied, and he knows that John Voight is crazy NSA like spy man who also is not going to give in. Like this guy can torture people and knows how to torture people and is willing to get tortured or whatever it is. He's a spy man. So he's crazy. Will Smith's like something's gonna go down. I guess we'll see. I got nothing. I got no other plan here. And we get a nice little trailer moment line from Gene Hackman where he says you're either incredibly smart or incredibly stupid. And Will Smith just winks at him and says we'll find out. So it's a nice trailer moment. So here we go. We're in a restaurant that looks great. Christmas time. Just smoke everywhere for some reason. We're in a restaurant. They're smoking in the back. We're in a restaurant and the family's like eating in the back. Again, just hilarious. And just, why? Because it looks good. It looks cool to like, have the cooks in the kitchen. Also, the cooks have to be in the kitchen because in a moment, everybody's going to start shooting at each other. So Will Smith is, again, playing with the truth, playing with just manipulating what's actually going on, playing with the facts because he's a lawyer. So he knows how to, like, kind of mess with people's, he knows how to mess with people's emotions. He kind of knows how to get what he wants out of people. So yeah, Gene Hackman over here, he's starting to catch on to what Will Smith's doing, and because he was there, he actually helped Will Smith gather. He was the one that gathered that information on the mob that Will Smith was using to blackmail them in the beginning in the first place. So he understands what's going on. He kind of puts it together that oh yeah, these two forces are not going to back down. Like this is what happens when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force, and the unstoppable force is going to be John Voight, and the immovable object is going to be Tom Sizemore and the mob, and so they're going to come to a head. And so Gene Hackman's like, okay, I see what's going on. I know that the FBI is watching, and so I'm gonna use that knowledge and I'm gonna try to get the FBI's attention. And in doing so, I'm gonna try to because the NSA doesn't know what's going on. Finally, the NSA is in the dark in on all this, and so now the FBI is hip to like something that's going on, and they're gonna end up coming in here. And so, what do we have? Boom! Time Sophomore is like, "What'd you say, John Voight? Get out of my face!" And he just mushes him, and it's on. We get a Mexican standoff. Guns get pulled out. It's on, and so everybody's got their guns out. It's all kind of craziness, and Tony Scott knows how to do a Mexican standoff. There's a lot of Mexican standoffs in Tony Scott films. Yes, it's called a Mexican standoff, and that's what I'm going to call it. So they're here. They got the guns pointed at each other. They're ready to rock. And I'm sorry, my iPad is going off. I just bought a new iPad, and now it's getting dings. So I don't know if you can hear it, but that's what's going off right now. So anyway, Guns are pulled. Now we know why we're in the kitchen because everybody's got to hide behind stuff. And obviously, we're going to pull out guns, so we can't be, in the restaurant during daylight hours. So, kind of a reason why they might have been, they needed to be eating in the back room. And so, boom, shit happens, and then all the guns just go off, and then all the bad guys just shoot each other up dead, just at the same time, just keep shooting each other, and it's just a mess, chaos. Guns are bad, people. Don't use guns. Things get shot, people get killed. Right? Will Smith's hiding under a table, so he doesn't get shot or killed. It's all good. Everything else gets just obliterated, including tomato sauce and wine bottles. Oh, and there's one guy, there's one cook, old school cook who now that poor bastard is like, you know, the lone survivor in all this mess. Gene Hackman sees the whole thing happen over the camera that got put on John Voight that John Voight asked for earlier. And so, like, again, like a lot of the stuff, everything that happens in this movie's like it's a lot of setup and payoff. Things get set up and then they get paid off, you know. And things don't. Sometimes you might look at something that you think just happened for no reason, like kind of like when you got the car chase and the car kind of blows up and is on fire for a little bit, and Will Smith's on fire. That could be just just like we need some more action, but really that's all set up so that we could burn the disc, and so that now Gene Hackman and Will Smith has to like start from scratch, and now they don't have any leverage. Their only leverage is kind of been given up, and so they have to use all these like different things to get back at the bad guys, which they do, and they pull off successfully. Jack Black and Jamie Kennedy are the lone survivors that are left after this whole deal. And hilariously, Jack Black is in a wheelchair with a neck brace. And it just kind of looks funny because it's Jack Black. Even then, not knowing Jack Black and who Jack Black is and what Jack Black would become, he just makes a neck brace look funny. So here we have the end. We got everything's getting wrapped up. The the bill that John Voight wanted to get passed has been like kind of like killed off, and so now the power that he was trying to make legit is now kind of getting put on the back burner, and so it's like kind of like a non-issue now, and at the end of this movie. And but again, the question of who when and if all this stuff ends up happening anyway, who's going to monitor the people that are monitoring us or them? So that's a big question. And so then we get a nice little moment where we kind of find that Gene Hackman put a camera in Will Smith's house just because, I don't know, he wants to keep tabs on him, wants to make sure he's okay. But it's a camera in his house that is just there now forever. And, you know, for some reason it's there, but I guess it's just to tell Will Smith that Gene Hackman's okay and he's out somewhere in the ocean. This part makes no sense on how that's able to happen. Like how he's able to like kind of hack into his TV broadcast and show him that those quick images, and then also show him the image of like himself on a closed circuit camera. That the angle is totally off, but whatever. And so that's the movie. That's our Satellite. That's our Will Smith. That's our Gene Hackman. That's our John Voight. That's our political thriller over. Tony Scott, the late great Tony Scott. One of his I really like this movie. I really like this in the Tony Scott like filmography. I think this is one of his like better ones. I don't really maybe I'll do a video where we rank Tony Scott movies. That'd be good. That'd be cool. Or just like Jerry Bruckheimer movies. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do Jerry Bruckheimer or Tony Scott. Can't do both because I feel like it would just be too much cross referencing. So maybe we'll do Jerry Bruckheimer. And because I think most of Jerry Tony Scott's films are from Jerry Bruckheimer anyway. Um so yeah, maybe we'll do a Jerry Bruckheimer like ranking of his greatest movies. And I'm sure we'll rank some of Tony Scott's great movies in there. You know, this is up there with Top Gun for me, Crimson Tide, Man on Fire. You know, Man on Fire and Crimson Tide are and True Romance. I mean, Tony Scott is just a man. And this is definitely I don't know if this is like makes like the top of the list, but it's definitely in that mid range. High mid range of Tony Scott films. And looking back on this movie now, I also appreciated it a lot more just for the subject matter and kind of the things that it dealt with and the way that it dealt with it. You know, really didn't try to really hammer any of these things into your head and pander and just take one side of the argument and kind of just like obnoxiously try to make you think that it posed like both the sides of the argument of this kind of little issue, not a little issue, but it raised this issue, showed you what both sides of the argument could be and are in this film, and we go from there. And then that's it. And we don't try to do too much. We're not trying to invent the wheel. We're just trying to make a political thriller about this sort of thing. And they do a really good job. And a lot of great set pieces. Like I said, Tony Scott knows how to shoot like a van, people in a van, people in a room. This movie and some like Michael Bay's movies down the road end up like really setting the look for like those CSI shows and the way things look in those shows, the way things are shot and edited and you know this is the blueprint of all that stuff. A lot of those people that worked on those shows and any of those movies are like were highly influenced by this and Tony Scott stuff. And so I just wanted to throw it out there and drop some knowledge on you guys and show you one of the greats that may be like forgotten sometimes. So if you haven't checked it out already, check out Will Smith's Enemy of the State, 1998. Tony Scott directed. Gene Hackman, just all around great movie. It's on Hulu. I'm watching it on DVD. The DVD is only just a It's let's see. I'll grab the DVD. We'll do a little DVD box. So yeah, this is just the regular Touchstone home video DVD, widescreen. Nothing fancy. Few special features are basically you get chapter selections, a couple theatrical trailers. The filmmaker, you get two featurettes. You get a production featurette. You get some languages that you could like switch to, and it's brought to you by in the digitally 5.1 audio, Dolby Digital. Sorry. So that's the DVD box. That's Enemy of the State again. That's the podcast. This is Moonrunner City. This has been Chris. You guys be good. I'll see you guys on the next one. Later.